Hi, I'm Michaela Lucas, a Year 10 student at Marist Catholic College, Penshurst. Sydney Catholic Schools is proud to present So You Want to Be a Doctor. Today, we speak to an individual whose unwavering commitment to the field of medicine has transformed lives, serving as a beacon of inspiration for us all through his work at one of Australia's most iconic medical services. Actively reducing the disparity in health service access in this country, he has dedicated his life to improving the health of those living in some of Australia's most remote locations. As an associate professor at the University of Sydney, he's as skilled at saving lives as he is nurturing the development of the upcoming generation of medical students. He has worked with the likes of New South Wales Ambulance, regional hospitals, and is the Chief Medical Officer for the Royal Flying Doctor Service for Western New South Wales.
Please welcome Dr. Randall Greenberg to the studio. I'm Tony Farley, Executive Director of Sydney Catholic Schools. With me today is our student co-host Michaela from Marist College, Penshurst. It's great to have you in the studio, Dr. Greenberg, and thank you for joining us. So let's get right into it. You've got a very impressive CV, so tell us how you decided to enter the field of medicine.
My pathway to medicine is not the usual pathway. I never wanted to do medicine when I was at school. Wasn't in the radar. In fact, I remember talking to some of my friends saying, I don't think that'd be a very good thing to do. Long hours and blood and wouldn't like that. So I left school with not a very good HSC, but somehow got into UNSW and did commerce for 3 weeks until I realised it just wasn't for me. And thankfully I did get out early because it wasn't for me and I would have surely been thrown out of university. I just got jobs around the traps. I worked at the Leyland factory, which was where Green Square is now. It used to be a factory, a car factory. So I was a spot welder doing what robots now do. I had a job at Central Railway cleaning out carriages. I had builder's labourer. Then, for some reason, jumped on a train and went to Perth. I had a job on a fishing boat. The guy lost his lease on the boat. I am leading up to how I get into medicine here.
This is a long and winding
I know
road.
it is.
Leyland, did you work on the P76?
No, I worked on the Marinas. And they weren't very good cars.
Okay.
But they were making P76s at the time. Us old people listening to this will remember these cars.
There'll be a few, Randall.
Yes. Anyway, so the guy lost his lease on the boat. I was out of work in Perth and I wanted to get some fish and chips for dinner. So I went to the fish and chip shop opposite the Shenton Park Hotel, which no longer exists. And while I was waiting for my fish and chips to cook, I said to the guy, do you have any jobs going around here? And he said, why don't you see if you can get a job at the local psychiatric hospital? And I said, okay. So the next day I knocked on the door and said, you got any jobs as cleaners? And they said, no. Orderlies? No. Wardsmen? No. Nurse's aide? Well, we've got your school certificate. I said, well, I've got my high school certificate. And they said, well, you can train to be a psychiatric nurse. I said, all right, well, I'll do that then. And so I did that for a few months in Perth and then came back to Sydney and did my nursing training at Roselle Hospital when it was a hospital. And then I finished there and thought, well, what do I do now? I quite like the health game, but, that I'd accidentally fallen into. So after much thought, I think I'll do my HSC again and see if I can get into medical school. So I went back to TAFE, Randwick Tech it was called then, Technical College, and did my high school certificate again. Luckily for me, Newcastle University had just started, and that took people on interviews and what's now called the UCAT, which is testing rather than just straight marks, and got in there. And that was the start of my journey, really. So I know it's a long and winded story, but I'm certainly not the usual pathway. But it does give a good example that there are many pathways of getting in.
Randall, there's also a parallel just in terms of your advancement through the medical profession because you're an emergency physician, so that's a specialty. You've been an intensivist in terms of intensive care. You're also a qualified medical administrator as well, aren't you?
That's right, yeah. Yeah.
So these are different roles that you've taken on. Usually a doctor will stick to one of those paths, but you've got 3 at least that you're on at the moment, including the role that you have at the moment. Is that unusual?
Not amongst emergency physicians. We tend to do lots of different roles. I think it's the nature of one of the great things about medicine is it takes every personality type. You can sit in a darkened room and look at x-rays and be a radiologist. You can be a psychiatrist, which is sitting down just talking to people. You can be an eye surgeon where you just have to sit down and just very, very patiently dissect an eye. You can be an emergency physician where you're just, bouncing around doing a whole lot of different things. That suits my personality type. And obviously within that, that's why I tend to like doing a whole lot of different things.
It's an extraordinary role. Do you have any particular moments that were most inspirational or moving or motivating in what's been a long and storied career?
Look, I've had some terrific moments, but reflecting on what, to me, have been the most inspirational moments, there are 2 things. One is when, and it happens in smaller towns, where people come up to me and say, "Oh, Dr. Greenberg, you may not remember me, but thank you very much for, you looked after my mum when she was dying and you were very nice to us." And it's not about making the really clever diagnosis, it's just about treating people as humans and, in their worst time, just helping them navigate through that. And the other side, which is similar, is when I get a junior doctor or someone that I have worked with as a junior doctor or as a medical student that will come up to me many years later and say, "Oh, Dr. Greenberg, you may not remember me, but you were so nice to me when I was an intern." In fact, one of the intensivists that's in Sydney at the moment, she reminded me that I was working in the emergency department on her very first day as an intern where she was just absolutely frightened. And she said, I was very nice to her and led her through. Those moments are really inspirational to me. So I think, you don't think of it at the time, but when you're reminded of it, it's really nice.
If you're thinking about a young person, they might be in year 10 or year 11 at school and they're thinking about pursuing a career in medicine. What would you say to them? How do they go about pursuing that?
There's lots of different pathways to getting into medicine. As prime example, Randall Greenberg, it's not just the usual one. I always think it's about following your own interests, and so there's getting into medicine, and there's also having the career path through medicine. To get into medicine, there is 2 major pathways: undergraduate and postgraduate. So you can go straight from school. In New South Wales, it's only Newcastle, University of Western Sydney, and University of New South Wales that do undergraduate. And there are other universities, Sydney universities, Notre Dame, Wollongong, that are postgraduate. So you can have a degree. Now, the undergraduate ones may have prerequisite subjects, so you need to check on that if you're really keen to go straight into it. For postgraduate, interestingly, a lot of people do medical science if they want to pursue that career, but you don't have to. So I have a current student that's got a philosophy degree. I've got one that's a barrister. I've had people with Latin degrees, Spanish degrees, all sorts of ancient history degrees. Most people do science things, but you don't have to, is what I'm saying. So especially if you're not sure, follow your passion, follow what you want to do, follow what really interests you, and you will do better at that.
And speaking of following your passion, I wanted to ask, when you were working as a psychiatric nurse, what was that moment when you realised you first fell in love with medicine and you wanted to pursue this as a career?
Yeah, good question. I sort of, as I've described, just fell into it. And then I was doing the job. And then it was the more, I think it just happened over a period of time. The more I did, I thought, this is a field I quite like. Health is a field that I quite like. And then the decision was, okay, I'll stick with health, but what do I do with it? Did I want to, go further in nursing, do allied health, do medicine? For me, I've made the decision that I want to do medicine. And look, at the time, it was a really difficult decision, especially you're a nurse. You look up to the doctors and you think, I don't know that I can ever do that. Just follow your passion. You can do it. Anyone can do it. You've just got to, if you really want to do it, just keep on with it. That's my advice.
What do you think should motivate the next generation of medical professionals? Where do you think their focus should be in terms of a contemporary medical system and profession?
I think there's a generational change, and so what I did, so I was a GP in Burke in the mid-1990s, and the hours I worked were ridiculous. That was what I did because that's what we all did, and very satisfying, and I really enjoyed it, but it was very hard work and long work, and I don't think my kids or the children of my generation want to do that anymore, and they shouldn't because it is ridiculous. So that's a generational change in the type of work and the hours of work. So that makes it very different. But I don't know that I can say what should motivate them. I just had one thing that happened to me that was quite nice, and that's I used to have a group of medical students, 4 of them, and I'd have them as a bedside group all year. So we'd meet once a week all year. So I got to know them quite well. In the beginning of the year, they were final year students. I asked them all where they wanted to do their internship, and some actually can do it in Dubbo. Some wanted to do it in Dubbo. This one fellow said, no, I'm going to go back to Sydney. Then came internship things, and I noticed that he'd put down Dubbo. I said, well, what happened there? I thought you were going to Sydney. He said, well, actually, I sort of watched you and noticed, and I realised you can actually have a decent career working in a regional town. That, there's this myth that, you have to be at Royal Prince Alfred or Royal North Shore to have a career, and it's rubbish. You can have this. I know that there's no way I would have the opportunities I've had if I'd been in Sydney. I've had this incredible opportunities because I've been where I have.
Okay, Dr. Greenberg, we come to that time in the podcast where there's a challenge for you. Are you up for the challenge?
Yes, Tony, I am up to the challenge.
Well, the challenge is the lightning round. It's 60 seconds of rapid-fire questions, and this is going to be driven by Michaela. Michaela, are you ready to give Dr. Greenberg the challenge?
Yeah, let's go. So what did you want to be in primary school?
No idea, but not a doctor.
What was your first job?
KFC.
What's one thing that you find you can't start your morning without?
I love a coffee.
Same. What was the last thing you Googled?
I Googled solar quotes.
And what's your favourite book? Well,
I'm currently reading Elon Musk's biography, which is absolutely fascinating. Brilliant man, but mad. But I've read a book called Batavia by Peter Fitzsimons, which is about a shipwreck in the 1600s, sort of historical fiction type thing. It's fascinating.
I love historical fiction myself as well. And how would you describe yourself in 3 words?
Sense of humour. I use it a lot in medicine. As when people are stressed, sense of humour settles things down.
Are you a dog or a cat person?
Oh, dog.
Same. And if you could have a superpower, what do you think it would be?
The power of healing.
And what would you do if you knew you couldn't fail?
Be an actor.
Oh, well done.
Perfect.
Well done.
Mm.
Dr. Greenberg, I think you'd be a fantastic actor.
Mm. I'd love to do it. Mm.
So you did great in the lightning round, but I also have some burning questions myself that I'm really keen to ask you about. What electives currently available at school do you think are most important for students wanting to follow a similar career path?
I will preface this by saying I believe the student should be doing the subjects that inspire them, that really that they're interested in, because they will do well in that. Having said that, it probably is advantageous to do probably science type subjects if you want to go straight into medicine. Chemistry, biology is helpful. That's also helpful for the tests to get into medical school, and perhaps maths as well. Writing essays, English type subjects are also very important, particularly in what's called the GAMSAT, which is a test you do to get into postgraduate medicine. They test your writing skills, and it's a very important thing to do as a doctor, your communication skills.
And you mentioned earlier that you pursued commerce as a university degree.
I didn't pursue it.
Oh, just selected it. Did you pursue mainly economics or the business type subjects in high school, or more sciences?
Interesting. I loved economics, macroeconomics. I really enjoyed that, but that was sort of laced with a bit of politics yes, I actually enjoyed that and got a decent mark in that. So, which just goes to show that that's not relevant to medicine, but I got a good mark in it because I was interested in it.
Gough Whitlam was the Prime Minister when you started there. 74?
70. I did my high school certificate.
You finished in 73, did you?
I did my first one in 1973, my second one in 1977.
Okay.
1978, after I'd done nursing. So 1978.
What's Malcolm Fraser then?
Malcolm Fraser.
Yeah.
Something else I've been a bit worried about in pursuing medicine. AI has been increasing prevalence this past year, and a lot of my peers, including myself, are worried that will be made redundant in the future. Do you think if I want to pursue a medical profession, is that AI something I have to worry about, or do you think it will go
I wouldn't bother being a doctor. You won't be required. No.
You scared me for a second.
No, look, AI, no. You're going to need people. You're going to need people. No matter how AI gets, you're going to need people. AI, I think, is going to enhance medicine. So they're particularly using it for things like, you've got a radiologist, a human being that will look at scans, a CT scan or X-rays. They're humans. They can miss things. So you can use AI to pick up, to actually scan, like you do facial recognition. You can do scan and normal, abnormal CT scans, MRI scans, etc. You still need a human being to oversee that because it's a machine and it can easily misinterpret something. I think AI is going to be really good for, I think, helping doctors. So I take a history from someone, but I might forget to ask an important question in the hurly-burly of all the other things that I'm doing. But if you can get, I think this is one thing I'm thinking, that AI can have a set of questions they can ask. You'll still need a human to actually look at the whole human side of it and really put it all together. And interestingly, reading Elon Musk's book, or the book about Elon Musk, he built the Tesla factories all with robots. And then he came to the conclusion that there were some jobs the humans were better than robots. So he actually de-roboted in some places the production line because he felt it was much more efficient for a human to pick up a screwdriver and put it in or do whatever. So there will always be a place for humans to be doctors, so don't worry about that.
It makes me feel.
But it will just help.
Yeah.
I think it will help us a lot.
Yeah, just enhance it.
Yes.
It's such a great question, Michaela. Just to advance on it a little bit, as far as a doctor is concerned and dealing with the patient, it's a very personal relationship that exists. It's clinical. It's also psychological and emotional. Have you had some experiences as a doctor where you felt overwhelmed emotionally from what you and the patient are going through and their families?
All the time. So I work in intensive care and I'm dealing with dying people, and that's very sad. But it really only hits me more when I go and sit down with the family and then they start crying, and then I feel their loss, that, there was a person I didn't really know. Sometimes I do shed a tear, and I always say to the medical students and doctors, it's okay. It's okay to shed a tear. We had a terrible case some years ago. There was a young bloke died in a motorcycle accident. He died in our emergency department, and the medical student burst into tears. Took her into the office and she said, I'll never be any good as a doctor. And I said, no, that's okay. You're a human being. And going back to AI, most of what we do is to do with the human part of it. So your question's really important because you don't want a robot telling you that your mother's going to die. That's not what you want. So the human part of what we do is, I think, the most important part of it.
You also worked as an emergency physician, and I imagine this environment would be very fast-paced with little room for second-guessing. How did you navigate such a stressful environment and act quickly and decisively? Does it require a special kind of personality?
There's two parts to that. Yes. And sometimes I see junior doctors come into the emergency department and they can't cope with it very well.
I feel like that would be me.
But that's okay. Because you can go off and do something else. You can be a neurologist or an immunologist or something else. So that's the great thing about medicine. It happens to suit my personality. They have little memes about what the specialties are, and I think the meme for emergency medicine is the attention span of a gnat. and likes running around. But
I'd be great at that.
Me too, honestly.
but my greatest nightmare would be being a neurologist or something where I'm just doing the same thing all the time. That's my biggest fear. But for other people, their biggest fear, the neurologists, I'm using that as an example, but their biggest fear is, my God, how can you work in that emergency department where you just got all these things happening at once? So it depends on your personality. Leading on from that, you're not born with the knowledge. I always make jokes when the intern says, I don't know. I said, well, I was just born with it. I know everything. It takes time. It takes years, literally years. And then after a few years, you get a gut feeling, you get an instinct, you got to have the knowledge, but you also get the experience. Once you've done that, you get so much better at it.
Yeah, I feel like I'd be able to run around and move from place to place, but I just have the stress from the patients and other nearby doctors that will just consume me. But yeah.
But you don't know because, when you start, it's all so new. And I've seen this so many times, people start, they're new and they're stressed. And then after a few years, things change. You get more experience and all of the junior doctors are very stressed and because, you don't know what you're doing really. Fortunately, the system is such that there's always someone senior, certainly in our country and in our state. That's the rules. You can't have an intern by themselves. So you're always covered, but it takes some years. So anyone listening to this, don't worry if you think I might be this, I might be that. Oh, plus the other thing too is, and I did allude to it, I used to get sick at the sight of blood when I was a kid. I was like, my weak stomach and all that sort of stuff. It's funny now. It doesn't bother me. You do get used to it. You do get used to that. So that shouldn't put you off if you've got another side of you said you want to do medicine. You think, maybe I won't stand the sight of blood, but you do get used to that.
Thank you. And one last question. Sorry. Medicine's a really vast field, and being the CMO of the RFDS, you have an extensive background experience in pre-hospital and retrieval medicine. We kind of touched on this earlier. Was this something that you fell into, or when you began your career in medicine, did you actively pursue this role?
I was at a workshop last week and was talking about something about your life, and the person next to me drew a picture of something. I said, what's that? She said, it's a pinball machine. I feel like I'm just like a pinball going all over the place. And I think that's what's happened to me for my whole career. So I was in London doing a year of anaesthetics because I wanted to be a rural doctor. And my wife was pregnant with our first child. And we thought we'll go back to Sydney, have the child. I'll just get a job in Sydney somewhere. And then we'll go and find a rural practice. So I needed a job in Sydney. This was in the days before the internet. Tony, you might remember this. So the medical ads used to come out in Thursday's Sydney Morning Herald. So I do. So my dad used to cut it out every week, put it in an envelope with a stamp and send it to me in London. I'd open it. And anyway, one day this one came up and it had doctor needed on helicopter, must have anaesthetics. And it was for the Westpac helicopter based at Little Bay. And so I applied and got the job, and that's how I got into retrieval medicine, basically. So I did that for a few years and then started my emergency training and went off and did rural general practice as well. So that's how I got into it, really.
Okay. 2 pieces of advice that we're wanting to hear from you about. And the first is, what's the best piece of advice you've ever received?
I've received so much advice over the years. I think when I was doing commerce at UNSW, I was with a friend and we met one of his family friends, and he'd just come back to university. I think he was really old, but he was in his late 20s or something. He had failed at university and he'd come back to do a course he wanted to do, and he said he found it really hard to get back into university because he dropped out, and he just looked at us not going to lectures and not doing very much and obviously not interested in what we were doing. And he said, guys, if you're not going to do it, get out now before you get kicked out. And that, I thought that was actually really good. Looking back, that was really good advice, and that sent me on my trajectory. Otherwise I probably would have just dropped out and never gone back. And the other bit of advice I thought of was, one of my colleagues, when we were at university, he said to me, I've just realised something, Randall. When we're looking at our careers and what specialty we want to go into, very tempting. You work in hospital with all these trainees in different fields. Don't look at them. Look at what the boss does. Look at the end product of what they're going to be doing, because that's what you're going to be doing for the rest of your life. So they're just two things that came to mind.
Thank you. That's really insightful. I'll take it on board.
So do you have some sage advice to give to a young person who might be thinking about pursuing a career in medicine?
I think it's the theme that I've already touched on, which is follow your passion. So, follow your passion when you're at school, follow your passion in your career. Don't do what you think is expected of you, because you won't be happy. I've met many people over the years that have been in what we'd call respected professions that are very unhappy doing what they're doing. And remember, you have to do it for the rest of your life, and you spend a lot of time doing it most of your day. So you really want to be doing something you like. And then within medicine, I give exactly the same advice to the medical students and the junior doctors. Choose something you like doing. Don't look at the money. Don't look at you do need to look at the lifestyle. You need to look at what you like and what you really want to do. And if you follow your passion, you're not going to lose.
Thanks so much for joining us here today, Randall. It's really been wonderful.
Well, thank you. It's been a real pleasure. And thank you, Michaela. It's been terrific. You've been a great host, I must say.
Thank you for inviting me. I've learnt more than I would have in the classroom today. And, you really inspire me, and I hope to follow in your footsteps in the future.
Oh, that's wonderful. Thank you, Michaela.
And it was nice to meet you too, Mr. Farley.
Thanks to both of you. Make sure to check out our Sydney Catholic Schools social media channels and see if you can guess who will be in our next episode. To find out more about the opportunities Sydney Catholic Schools offers in STEM, visit our website, which you can find in the show notes.